Hey guys, welcome back. Emily Jean if you're new here, and today I want to chat all about Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. So if you want to hang out, grab your coffee, grab your tea, and let's get cozy. Okay, so this was actually my first Brandon Sanderson book. I can't believe it, but I've been getting so much more into fantasy and sci-fi this past year, and I asked my librarians to help me pick out my TBR for this month. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it in the description box below, but this was one of the books that they picked out, and I'm so glad they did because I hadn't heard of it. I probably wouldn't have picked it out myself, and I ended up loving it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'll give you some more details on that in a second. I'm going to do a spoiler-free review first, and then we'll go into more of the spoiler stuff. If you don't know this book, Skyward, our main character is Spencer, and we're kind of following the remaining people of the human race, like the remnants of the human race, are trapped on this planet. They don't have a lot of technology. Many years ago, they crashed into this planet and they've been surviving ever since. They live in caves because they're constantly being attacked by these aliens, presumed to be aliens. They're always being attacked. So their whole existence is trying to fight these off, trying to survive, trying to grow. The most respected position in this community is a pilot, because they're who keeps everybody else safe, right? And so Spencer really wants to be a pilot. It's like her life dream. And she's kind of an outcast in the society too because of the actions of her dad. So years before, her dad was in a battle. He was a pilot too, and it's said that he was a coward and he abandoned his other pilots and he abandoned the fight. And so he's called a coward, and Spencer and her family are branded cowards as well. So she's kind of had to deal with that. So this is kind of a story of her redemption, of her stepping into pilots and figuring out what really happened with her dad. So as far as my CAWPILE for characters, I gave it 8. I really enjoyed the way the characters were described. I really enjoyed how we got to feel the relationships with different characters. And of course, I love the character of the sentient robot, so that was really enjoyable as well. It's actually a sentient spaceship, which is so cool. And then for atmosphere, I gave it an 8 as well. I love a good sci-fi atmosphere. I loved the setting of the planet, and outside of the planet are all of these like space remnants, like old chunks of space debris and spaceships, and it creates this kind of shield around the planet. I thought that was so cool, and I also thought it was really interesting that they were living in caves. So the whole atmosphere and the whole setting I just loved. Writing, I gave it a 7. It was really enjoyable writing, easy to read. I didn't feel like anything groundbreaking, but it was still really enjoyable for the writing style. Plot, I gave it an 8. Definitely a great plot. I thought it was so well developed and really enjoyed that. Intrigue, I gave it a 7. There were some parts of the book that felt like a little bit slower or longer than they needed to be. Didn't really throw me off totally, but it did drop it down to a 7 for me. Logic was also a 7. There were some things I wasn't quite sure made sense with the characters as we knew them, but not too bad. So 7 there. And then overall enjoyment was an 8. I absolutely loved it. So that averaged out to 7.57, which translated to a 4-star book for me. On GoodReads, this has about 89,000 reviews and an average of 4.5 stars. So pretty much in line with what the majority of people are thinking about this book. And I was so happy to find out that it is a series and the 3rd book is being released this November. So I'm definitely going to continue on with this series for sure. And I think that's about all I can say before I jump into the spoiler reader chat. I hope you'll hang out for that part, but if you don't want any spoilers, this would be the time to say goodbye, maybe go check out some other videos. And if you are hanging out for the reader chat, then continue on. Okay? So my notes from Skyward. So I just kind of share where I made notes from the book and what stuck out to me. On page 14, I just had to share this quote I absolutely loved, probably because I related to it. So Sanderson writes, "It turns out strange little girls grow up to be strange young women." Yes. The strangeness never really goes away. I was telling another booktuber that she was reviewing the things they carried, and in high school my friends and I did a interpretive dance for our book project for the things they carried, and there were silver spoons involved. We went in the auditorium in front of the rest of the class. Like, it was a whole thing. So strange little girls that definitely turn into strange young women. Page 23, we start getting more into Spence's story and more of how she's treated as the coward's daughter. And what I found really interesting was that this whole thing of her dad becoming a coward happened when she was about 9 years old. And so now we see her like high school age, getting ready to graduate high school, I think maybe 17, 18. And she's still being teased so heavily. Page 23, they're still teasing her about being a coward's daughter, like actively teasing her. Oh, here's the coward again. Would they really still be teasing her after all those years, or would she be more like just ostracized? That was part of the logic thing that dropped me out of it. It felt like, of course, we needed to understand how teased she was, but it logically just didn't make sense to me that they'd still be teasing her actively that many years later, like a decade later. It feels like at that point she'd just be kind of ignored and forgotten about in the class. Then page 148, we find out there's a sentient robot, M-Bot. Oh my god, I meant to look up which came first, Murderbot or this book. I don't know, but the fact that it was an M-Bot was like, wait a second. But it was a sentient spaceship, so I am hooked from this point. And I was also very worried that Jorgen was going to take like drastic measures to get back at her for stealing the battery and the way that she was acting in class. And so I was a little bit worried that she was going to come back to an empty cave and the ship was going to be gone. And I was very happy that nobody ever destroyed the ship, that it never disappeared, that it wasn't ruined, because that would have been really heartbreaking. And then I was really interested on page 153. It's just referenced, and I realize now it's never brought up again. I think probably because I'm a parent, it caught my eye, but it was mentioning the 6 parental metrics. And I was wondering if this was a sort of population control. It was implying that Spence's parents had hit all 6 of the parental metrics. So I'm assuming it's a way that they rated who could be parents or who could have a second kid. I think that's what it was. You were allowed to have a second kid if you hit these parental metrics, something like that. As far as world building, that felt really interesting, but we didn't really get any more around that. But you could imagine that living in a cave culture, trying to keep your population low, there would have to be some way to decide. I guess people would agree to that. But I just thought that was interesting. And then this was where the pacing was a little bit off for me sometimes. Around page 174, 177, they went into one of the very first battles just as brand new students, and they lost 2 of their members, and I didn't feel as sad as I thought I was supposed to be. And I was like, am I really hard-hearted? What's going on here? But at that point, so early on in the book, I just didn't feel as connected to the characters yet. I mean, I did feel sad for Spin, but at that point in the book, I wasn't as connected to anybody else except Cobb and Rig and the slug. How cool is the slug, too? Like, why didn't we find more about what this cave slug is and how sentient he is? And were there any other ones? I loved the slug, too. I also really enjoyed the drawings of the spaceships. Those are really cool to have added in there. It really helped me visualize, especially the Krell ships, what their tentacles, like the hanging electric cords looked like, because that's not what I was picturing in my head when she said there were loose cords. I was picturing just like wires everywhere instead of like, they definitely made the look of the spaceship. I really enjoyed the relationship between Cobb and Ironsides and kind of getting to see some of their history with Spence's dad and how it must have felt to be a part of that battle and not understand what's happening, and somebody that you trust is coming back and attacking you. It just felt really interesting to understand how these 2 characters got to be who they were. And at one point on page 178, Ironside says about Cobb, that's why having someone to defy you is key. And this made so much sense because she didn't have anybody else. She was so well respected. She didn't have anybody else who like would say no to her except for Cobb. And so I think it really is important to have those people that you trust in your life. Don't just do this with everybody. You got to make sure you trust them, but that you have those people you trust in your life who you're willing to let defy you. Right? So that it helps you think outside the box and not kind of get stuck in those echo chambers. So I really liked that. Page 188, page 288, we start hearing more about the defect. It's heightened around the Krell. The intrigue is really here. I started guessing, like, are the Krells human? Are the original Defiance the enemies? Like, what is Imba? What's going on here? So the intrigue was getting really high right here. But then as we started to get to page 386, it was like high intrigue, but slow pacing. Like there were just a little bit too much story sometimes, a little bit too much time spent at the school. And then we would like immediately jump into a battle scene. And so the pacing was a little bit off for me for sure. Then we start getting towards the end of the book and we're starting to get some more info about the defect, about her dad going into the sky and like, what did he see? What did we see? We want to know. We still don't know at this point. So that was really enjoyable. Page 433, when they're riding with a different team. I think that it's Spencer and I can't remember the other character's name, but two of the girls are riding with another team and the team's like showing off how they can use their lance to move around the asteroids, and Spencer and the other character look at each other like, I think they're trying to impress us, and then they just go full-blown into like tricks and accuracy with their spaceship and their movement, and it just really shows how well Cobb trained them. So I loved this scene on page 433. That was one of my favorite scenes. And then when Mbot shows back up, you guys, how much did you love when Mbot showed back up? Page 482, he said he chose a new pilot. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. You know what? I was kind of expecting that his pilot was either going to be Cobb or Spencer's dad. So it was interesting that we really never found out who the pilot was, but I guess it's because it was like from so long ago. But I hope we do learn a little bit more about Mbot's past. But I was like, I didn't actually cry, but that feeling of like just tears and joy when he said he chose a new pilot, it was so, so good. And then all of chapter 53 was just my favorite. It was so good. I had laughter and smiling and just so incredibly proud of Spencer and the way that she was holding herself and Mbot and like the decisions that she was making to protect the world and to go beyond it and see what was happening. Oh my God. And then when he said biological component engaged, oh, goosebumps. It was so good. Amazing. Just, oh my gosh, goosebumps. You're like really invested at this point in the story, and it was so satisfying as a reader. And then once she kind of moves beyond and sees the reality of what's on the other side of the barrier, so smart, so cool that they're like being imprisoned by these aliens that aren't really that brave. Oh my God, it was just so interesting. I thought it was such a good twist that I wasn't seeing. I mean, of all the questions, I definitely didn't predict that. So that was really neat. And I think it's going to give them a lot more information moving into the second book and how to kind of handle that. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I love that they were afraid of her when she was looking out the window. They were like, I think it's looking at me. It was so good. I really enjoyed that. And then there was like page 503, there was relief and sadness at figuring out what happened to her dad. Like he fought till the end, even when he thought he was fighting the Krell, but it was actually his respected friends and team members. Oh my God, just heartbreaking. So I'm curious now what will happen definitely in book 2 about like his reputation, how much will be shared, how they're going to approach this now that they know. Oh, so good. It was just so good. I think What would have made it a 5-star read for me would have been the pacing a little bit better. I feel like 200, no, not 200 pages. I feel like 50 pages at least could have been cut out. Like there was just a little bit longer where it didn't need to be. So pacing would have made it 5 stars, and I think that's it. I think that was my biggest issue with it. So absolutely enjoyed, would highly recommend if you like sci-fi, if you like sentient beings. If you haven't read any Sanderson yet, I really enjoyed this as a first Sanderson book. Let me know in the comments what book you think I should check out next from Sanderson. I mean, I'll definitely check out the second in this series, but as far as his adult books, which one you might think I might enjoy, let me know in the comments below. And that's all for today. So thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate you. And hopefully I'll see you in another video very soon. Okay, bye guys.